Hi and welcome to today's TurboCAD webinar presentation. The theme for today will be the 2D drawing essentials, and I'll be covering the following topics: the TurboCAD interface and getting help, 2D drawing tools overview, snaps versus Sikhs, 2D modifiers, and the coordinate system and workplane basics that you'll need to know when you're working in 2D. I'm going to choose Control A to select all, and then hit the delete key and just clear my desktop here. The TurboCAD default interface is set up like this. So we've got our title bar here at the top. Directly underneath this is our pull down menus where every tool and command in TurboCAD can be accessed. We've got a standard toolbars here. We've got our properties toolbar here, and the way that the drawing tools and modifier tools are set up in the interface is like this. So on the left hand side we've got our drawing and insertion tools, and on the right hand side here we've got our modifier tools. So for instance, if I draw a line, I can right click and choose a select tool, and now notice that some of these modifier tools have become available and lit up. As before, if I have no line or object on my screen, then these tools are grayed out, indicating that they are not accessible at the moment or usable at the moment. And this is because you've got to actually have an object in your drawing to make use of these. The drawing area itself is by default set up to allow you to draw in model space. We recommend you draw in model space at a 1:1 scale. And then we've got a tab down here called Paper Space. The Paper Space tab allows you to create layouts and insert viewports so that when you need to scale your drawing contents, you can automatically do that through our viewports and not worry about having to scale from the beginning of your drawing session. So model space is where you want to do the majority of your drawing, and you'll want to work in a 1:1 scale. You can go to Options, Space Units to control that. So you can work in either English or Imperial or metric, and you'll set that up through your Space Units dialog box. Underneath these two tabs here, we've got what's called the inspector bar. The inspector bar is critical for using TurboCAD. It allows you to enter parameters for any of the tools or objects you're working with. So this will constantly change based on which tool or process you're in the middle of using. So for instance, notice the length and angle field here with the line tool. If I come down here and choose the Polyline tool, I've got some additional parameters that I can make use of. In addition, we've got some sub options listed here, and again these will change based on the tool that you're using. So if I go back to the line tool, notice there are no options. If I go back to the Polyline tool, the inspector bar is indicating to me that I've got some additional options. The right click local menu also has these same options here in the lower section of this group of tools. Underneath the inspector bar, you'll have the status bar or status line. Always refer to this when you're working in TurboCAD. It will give you the instructions of what the application is expecting you to do next. So for instance, it's expecting me right now to define the start point of a line. So I'm going to do that, and I'll draw a couple line segments here. If I right click and choose the arc segment option, notice that the status line is now telling me to find the endpoint of an arc. So this will change based on where you are in the tool or process. So always refer to the status line. It will help you be more efficient with TurboCAD. Over here on the right hand side, we've got Snap and Geo. You can turn these on and off by left clicking. You can right click and set up whichever snap and geometric aid tools or options you want. When these are grayed out, they're disabled completely. So generally speaking, at least when you're just getting going, make sure they're lit up so that your snaps and geometric aids are working. To the right of that, we've got the X, Y, and Z coordinate fields, and notice as I'm moving my cursor around, the numbers in those fields are changing, so this is telling me where in my model space I'm working. If I go back to the line tool, for instance, and I notice that I'm on 4 up here in the X, and I come down to 4 down here, notice the coordinate fields are pretty close. They're very accurate, so I'm not quite being precise, which is going to be hard if I'm just kind of freehand drawing. So in the case of a line tool here, if I want to be exact, I can define the start point of my line by hitting the Shift and Tab keys. This enables the X field, and I'm going to type 4 in the X, and I'm going to type 4 in the Y, and then I'm going to hit Enter, and that has now started at a point exactly at 4 and 4 on the X and Y coordinate planes. On the right hand side, we also have our palettes. There's some commonly used palettes here by default. So for instance, the selection info palette, which is going to be critical when you're working with TurboCAD, will allow me to understand what type of objects I'm working with. So I've got a line tool here, I've got a polyline here, and then in the properties fields here, I can control the parameters of these particular objects. So these are known as the palettes. The palettes can be moved around. They can also be moved to a secondary screen, and if you need to replace them or put them back where they were, you can just double click on them like that. To customize your desktop, we're going to go to the Customize dialog box. There are several tabs here at the top which allow me to configure my desktop and application however I'd prefer. There are several options for the theme. The two most popular would be the classic, which is the gray interface, and the default, which is the dark interface. I also have the ability to work in the LTE workspace. The LTE workspace has the TurboCAD command line, so for users that are used to AutoCAD interface, you'll probably want to use the LTE workspace if you're used to or prefer to work with the command line. There's some other options here for customizing your desktop, such as the icon size and local menu icon size. The toolbars themselves can be individually enabled. For instance, I like to use the palettes toolbar, so I'll click on that and then drag this over on my desktop where I like it. This is a group of all of the TurboCAD palettes, not just the 5 default ones that are available or 6 default ones that are available when you open up TurboCAD. So I like to have these up here just because I use all of the palettes a lot. We also have a commands toolbar, so anytime you've got the Customize dialog box up, you can actually grab any of these commands here and then place them in an existing toolbar or elsewhere on the desktop. You can also create a new toolbar of your own. So we'll just call this new, and I'll put it up here. And now I can go to the commands toolbar and start adding any of the commands to this toolbar that I'd like. So TurboCAD is very customizable as far as your workspace, and you can set it up any way you like. Once you do that, you want to come here and in the Save pull-down menu, say My Config, or name it whatever you'd like. So I'm going to say Save In, and what that's going to do is add it to this group of configuration files here. So Save In, and now you'll see My Config is one of the available configuration files. The Browse button will let me go to the folder where all of my config files are located. So in the event that I want to transfer my configurations to another machine or pass them on to another user, I can do that very easily. And finally, the keyboard commands can be modified to your liking. So for instance, if you've got a command that you use frequently, I'm going to choose the 3D mesh command here, and I'm going to type in Shift plus M and try to assign this. TurboCAD's letting me know that this is already assigned to a different shortcut, so I don't want to reassign this one. I'll just simply choose another one. So let's use Shift plus 3, and now I will assign that. And again, I've made a change to my desktop, so I want to come in here and save this. So it'll prompt me to overwrite that. And now, if whatever tool I've got enabled, if I want to enable the 3D mesh tool, I can simply hit the Shift plus 3 key, and now that tool is active, and now I'm drawing a 3D mesh. Okay, so we talked about customizing the desktop. Now let's go into how to get some help when you're stuck in TurboCAD. We'll start with this context-sensitive help button. What this allows me to do is pick any tool or menu command and go straight to the help section for that tool. This will activate the online help and take me directly to the instructions for how to use the tool that I've chosen. Rather than using the icon, you can also come over to the tool and hit the F1 key. That'll do the same thing. So a very quick and efficient way to get help in TurboCAD. Some other help resources are available through the help menu. I highly recommend, if you have not gone through the getting started videos, that you do that. This will kick you over to our website and give you a playlist of recommended videos for users who are just brand new to TurboCAD and getting started. These will also work well as a refresher for some of the more basic tools. We do have a YouTube channel as well. I highly recommend you visit this frequently. We're always updating this information. We've got brand new TurboCAD 17 new features playlist here, along with some other existing playlists. And like I said, you'll want to visit this frequently, as we're always updating these playlists. Go back to TurboCAD here. We've got this TurboCAD on the web menu. You can go to our support site or our website, but if you're not already a member of the TurboCAD forum, I'd highly recommend you come here, as it will be a fantastic resource for you to learn and understand more about TurboCAD. We've got one of the more active and helpful communities of any application out there that I've ever seen, so definitely register and make use of this. Okay, and lastly, I want to point out a couple of the training products on the TurboCAD.com website. So I'm going to come here and I'll go to TurboCAD Windows and go to Training and Certification. And we've got these fantastic training guides. There's a wide variety of them. Since we're talking about the 2D tools today, let's just click on this button here and take me to the 2D training guide for Pro Platinum, and I can actually give you a quick preview of this. So let me come here. This is the 2D training guide, and it will teach you all of the tools in TurboCAD in a very nicely laid out fashion, teaching you step by step everything that you'll need to know as you're starting to learn TurboCAD. So it'll take you through some basics, and then it'll go into these tutorial sessions where you'll actually do some really nice drawings. These guides contain both written content as well as animated content which backs up the tutorial sessions. So for instance, concentric circles, we'll click on the animation here and check out one of these movies really quick. The animations are done with callouts. There's no audio, in other words, and so you'll walk step by step through the same lessons that you have the written material on, only you'll have the opportunity to see TurboCAD in action and follow the steps through these animated lessons. So I would highly recommend you take a look at these, and in addition, we have got, if I go back to this page, I want to also point out that we've got the training and certification site. This is basically the same content as the guides. However, there are two main differences. One, it's purely web-based, and so you can view this not only on a laptop, but you can also go through the lessons if you've got a mobile device. And there are assessment training lessons or tests at the end of each session, so you're really ensuring that you're learning the concepts once you go through the assessments there. There's also a live instructor available to answer your questions about this if you've got any thing here. So let me just go in here and I'll show you what that's like. So in other words, there's a chat window here. Typically there's a user or some other professor waiting to answer your questions or work with you. But if I look at the assessments here, this is give you an idea of what these are like. So you go through a couple of lessons, and then as you work your way through all of the training guide sessions, you'll be assured that you're understanding the concepts fully, and eventually you'll get certified. Okay, so now let's go back to TurboCAD and talk about some of the 2D drawing basics. I'm going to use Control A to select all, and I'm going to hit the delete key to clear my desktop. That's actually a pretty common question, as why is there no erase option in TurboCAD? You'll notice there's just simply not an erase or delete key functionality listed. However, anytime you select objects and just hit the delete key on the keyboard, you are effectively erasing those objects. Okay, so let's continue on with the 2D drawing tools overview. I'll again choose my line tool and explain a little bit more about how to draw a line. So again, I'll refer to my status line down here. I've got the line tool selected, and it's telling me to define the start point. So in this case, I'll just click, and now I've plotted the first point, and I can just simply move my mouse. I don't have to hold the left mouse button down as I go along in TurboCAD. It's not a click and drag application. It just simply lets me plot that first point and then move my mouse freely. And as I move my mouse, I can hit the Shift key, and that will lock the line or what other objects I might be drawing into what we call one of the orthogonal modes. So this allows me to accurately draw a line at either the 0, 90, 180, or 270 angle. And so this segment will be locked in at the 0 angle here, and I'll just simply click to plot the second point and finish the command. I'm going to right click and choose my select tool, and once I do that, you'll notice a couple of things. First of all, the two blue dots or blue squares here on the end points are what we call vertices. These are things that I can redefine the length of the line with by clicking. And I've also got a green, what we call rotation handle here. I can click once on that and start rotating my object. Notice down here in the inspector bar, I've got the angle, rotation angle updating as I move. I can also hit the tab key and lock that in at a specific angle and hit enter, and now that line is 45 degrees. Over here in the selection info palette, I see the length is now 16 because remember I moved the end node points just kind of freehand. So if I want to make this a specific length, I can come down here and type 15, and now that's exactly 15 inches in length. And I can also redefine the angle, so let's put that back to 0. The yellow dot in the middle is something that's critical in understanding how TurboCAD operates. So this is called the reference point, and notice that in the XY fields down here, it's given me a location. That location is based on this reference point, and I can actually pick this reference point up and move it elsewhere. So let's put it here at this second endpoint, and now we see that the location has changed. And let's say I want to now take that endpoint and put that at a specific location as well. So I'm going to click to start moving. I do not have to hold the left mouse button down. I can just use the left mouse button to click as if I'm picking up the object. And now as I'm moving around, notice the position fields down here are active. If I want to move it a certain distance away from where it is currently, I can also do that. But in this case, let's just put this at a specific X and Y position location. So let's choose 10 and 10, and I'll hit enter. And now notice that the end point here, which is the same point as the reference point, is at 10 and 10 on the X and Y coordinates. I can reposition the default reference point or stick the reference point back in its default location by right-clicking and choosing default reference point. And again, the positions in the X and Y coordinate fields down here in the inspector bar are going to be based on the location of that reference point. Okay, so now I want to introduce the concept of snaps, and to do this I'm going to pick a circle tool, and notice as I touch the line that I get a little indicator next to my cursor telling me that that is going to essentially snap to the end point of that the first point of the line here. If I put it on the other side, I'll get the same thing, and if I move it closer towards the middle, I'm going to get a slightly different looking indicator next to my mouse button. And these are the snaps, and the snaps allow me to draw accurately without having to worry about precision, because the chances are if I didn't have my snaps on, which I can turn off by clicking there, and I tried to do the same thing, if I put my cursor here and go, okay, well, let me draw exactly on that endpoint, and I click and zoom into the reference point, oh, look at that, it's a little bit off. So the snaps allow me to draw and position objects with very good precision and not really have to worry too much about whether I'm doing so. So the concept of the reference point with the snaps is critical to understanding how to draw precisely in TurboCAD. So a little bit more on the snaps. If I right click on this and I look at my snap settings here, I want to point a couple of things out. By default, this always show auxiliary lines is on, and I prefer to have that off myself, because this is what happens if I've got several objects on my drawing here, and then I come and draw another object like a line. As I'm moving along, oh, the geos aren't on. As I'm moving along, I should start getting these indicators, and when always show auxiliary is on, what ends up happening is you end up getting a whole bunch of these indicators on your screen, and until you zoom out or refresh the screen, those remain on the screen. So in a situation where you've got lots and lots of objects and you've got lots and lots of snap points, it can get pretty messy pretty quickly here. And so for my personal preference, I tend to like to turn this off. As long as these two geometric aids are on, and as long as this geometric aid is on, I can still get the same effect. I just got to work out a little bit. So let's just see if we can get one going here. There's one there, and now if I come up here and do that, and now I want to draw at an intersection there, the geometric aids are still active, but they're a little bit easier to work with as far as graphically on the screen, having a little bit more cleaner drawing area. So that's really the only change from the default snap modes that I like to make. There is actually one other default snap mode, and that is this in Aperture only setting. And let me explain in Aperture. So let's go back to our circle here, and if I go to Options and Preferences, there is a setting actually called Show Snap Aperture. So if I turn this on, watch what happens. I'm now going to get a little circle as I'm moving my cursor. Okay, and notice as I get close to the snap modes that it'll invoke the snap. And in the case of in Aperture only snaps, so let's go back here and we see the quadrant point is in Aperture only. As I'm moving along here, and I want to use one of the what we call Sikhs, notice what happens. So the Sikh for quadrant is going to be the Q key. So if I'm over here and I type in the Q, I get an error saying that I'm not within the snap aperture. And so the reason for this is that I'm not within the circle, which is indicating the aperture distance. So if I do the same thing and I come down to this quadrant down here, and notice I'm inside there, and I'm actually getting the indicator because I've got my snaps on in this case, but I can hit the Q key, as long as I'm in there, and it will snap to that exact quadrant. It'll be a little easier to understand if I turn the snaps off. So now I don't get any snap indicator, but this is one of the more powerful features in TurboCAD, and that's the concept of a Sikh, which is single entry keyboard equivalent. So let's try some of these. So we know the Q snap is for the quadrant, so I'll again go, I'm not within that range here. I'm going to choose there, and now that is within the aperture and over here. So I'll go again here and down here, and now let me turn off my geos. So now I'm going to have no snap or geo active at all, and this is really kind of how some of the power users use TurboCAD, because it is actually quicker and more efficient in a lot of cases. So let's try a different one here. I'm going to try a line tool, and this time I'm going to snap to a midpoint on this line. Well, since midpoint is not within the aperture, if I choose any place on this line and hit the M key for midpoint snap, it's actually going to work this time without giving me the error. Okay. Similarly, if I'm at the midpoint and I want to snap to the closest vertex, I'm going to hit the V key for snap to vertex, and there I go. So this is, once you get the C keys down, you'll be very, very accurate and very, very quick in your drawing. Whoop, I kind of moved my cursor there. So I'm going to hit V here, and let's choose M here. And the key for the snaps and for the Sikhs is you've got to be touching the line with your cursor independent of the aperture. I'll go ahead and turn that off and show you that little trick. Okay, so the key for using the snaps and Sikhs is you've actually got to be touching the line or object that you're trying to snap to or against. And so here I'll go V here, and let's just choose M here. And there's also some other Sikhs that are important to know. Center is a C, so center of the circle or arc, C. And then you've got other ones like intersection is I, and there's a whole list of them which you can get information on. In fact, if you go to help and keyboard, you can get a full listing of all of the keyboard shortcuts in TurboCAD, and here we go. Here's the Sikhs that I'm talking about. So you'll want to maybe print this out and have this accessible and understand and use this snaps and the Sikhs. That'll make you very efficient in TurboCAD very quickly. Okay, so we've talked about using the selection tool, and I'll right click and choose a selection tool. I can also, by the way, use a spacebar on the keyboard. That will also enable the selector tool. And so far we've only been selecting objects one at a time, and so if I click on the circle, I can make this an editable object, or I can move it or whatever. And if I want to select multiple objects, I can hold the shift key down and continue my selection mode. This is actually a toggle. Notice a little plus minus indicator here. So as I'm selecting or reselecting objects, if they're selected, they're magenta color, and if I want to reverse my selection of that particular object without deselecting these other ones, I can just click on it again and now it's unselected, and I can move just these two items out of the way. But there's some other selection modes in TurboCAD that are important to understand. So first of all, if I click and drag from left to right, I get a blue selection window, and what this indicates is any of the objects encased within this selection window are going to be selected. If none of them are fully encased, then they won't select. So in this case, look at that, only this line became selected because it's the only object in this case fully encased within that, or enclosed within that blue selection rectangle. So that's going left to right. If I go the opposite direction, and I can do this either up or down, this selection mode will select anything that is touching the rectangle. So in this case I should have all of these objects highlight, which they do, and now they're all selected and editable. I can move them or place them wherever. So one other thing that you need to know when you're just learning TurboCAD, we've talked about the selection info palette here. I'm going to turn on this design director palette and talk a little bit about layers. There's also a layers dialog box available here. These work in conjunction with one another, but for quicker access and maneuverability and kind of just workflow, you've got the ability here in the design director to manage layers. So I can right click here and I can say new layer, and we'll call that layer 2. And now let me select a couple objects here. I'll now have these selected, and notice the active layer check mark is here, indicating that all of these objects are on the same layer. So I will come over here and now put them on layer 2, and let's say I want to hide those. I can use this visible toggle to turn them on and off and make them visible, because there's going to be a lot of times when you don't want items in your way as you're working. I can also then right click and say select by. So that's another method of selecting, which makes your life really easy and your workflow better. And let's just select by, and let's change the color of all these objects. So right now they are brown. Let's change them to be by layer. Okay, and now they should be black because the layer here is black. If I want to change that color, I can change it to blue, and those items are now blue. And then finally, one other trick for working with colored objects is if I want to hit Control and the K key, I bring up Select by Color, and that's another method for quickly grabbing and selecting objects of a certain type or color. And finally, Control T will let me select by the type. So let's go down to the lines, and I'll select all my lines here easily. So there's quite a variety of ways to quickly and accurately select objects for editing. So we've talked about the circle tool a little bit. We've talked about line and rectangle. One other critical 2D tool that you'll definitely want to make use of is this Polyline tool. This is one of my favorite tools in TurboCAD, and actually it contains line and arc segments. So I'll just start drawing freehand here a little bit, and let's turn snaps on here for a second. You can kind of get an idea for how they work in this situation. Okay, look at that. I'll hold shift key down and it'll snap to that intersection at a nice straight 180 degree angle. And if I right click, I can say arc segment here, and we'll right click and say close. I've discussed selecting objects, and when you do so you get a bounding box here. So now I'm going to introduce the concept of the edit tool, and this again is a critical tool for understanding how TurboCAD works and manipulating objects and modifying objects. So you can get to this a couple of different ways. I can select the object with the selector, and once the object is editable, I can right click and go to the edit tool, or I could just choose the edit tool from the beginning here and work with it here. So again, the blue rectangles are all my node points. The green rectangles are actually arc points. And notice down in the inspector bar, when I click an arc or a node, I get a little bit different options here. So that's an arc segment. I mean, that's a straight line node segment. If I click on the arc segment, I believe I get slightly different values available, and if I want to type in accurately accurate parameters, I can do so. Now for the node point and arc points, you can actually add or delete them on any objects. So in this case I'm with the Polyline tool, and let's just get rid of this arc segment here. That creates a straight line segment there. I'll do the same thing here and here, and now we're working with just straight lines, and I can move these nodes. I can also actually start to grab a node and put it in a precise location as well. So I'm in the process of moving this node. If I start moving it here, I'll look at my cursor indicator, and let's shift tab, and let's just put that at 25 and tab and 25. Hit enter, and boom, that is exactly at 25. Let's select this object, move the reference point to that location, and just kind of check our values out. So sure enough, I'm at 25 based on that node. I'll right click and put my default reference point back. So let's go back to the edit tool, talk about this a little bit more. Anytime I've got an angle, so like this one, if I notice there's two angular segments, if I right click here, I can also add an arc. Okay, so if I look at this straight line segment and I try to do the same thing there, the only available option for me is to add a node, and then once I pull this up, I can then add an arc. Okay, so understand how the edit tool works and incorporate some of these techniques in your drawings, and you'll start understanding a little bit more about how to manipulate geometry and work with it accurately. Okay, one final point on polylines in general. What I'm going to do next is select this and explode this, and this is going to break this polyline into a series of segments and arcs, and if I do it a couple more times or one more time here, it'll break it down even farther. So these are now individual line and arc segments, and so in a lot of cases geometry will be drawn using a combination of lines and arcs, and if you're not careful, what can happen here, and what I'm going to actually do is take one of these nodes and slightly displace it here. Well, snaps are on here, so let me turn that snap off and do that again. Put it here. Okay, so if I'm zoomed out and I'm not really paying attention, and let's put it a little closer here. So if I'm not paying attention, what happens a lot of times is people will use the join polyline tool to create one polyline line out of this series of arcs and lines. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and I'll click my way around here using the join polyline tool. Okay, and just pretend I can't see that. If I'm zoomed out, it looks closed. So I'm going to say finish, and now when I select this and go to my selection info palette, we'll see in fact it is a polyline. And so now I'm thinking, okay, well, I've got the geometry that I want, but let's check this out a little bit further. So I'm going to use the pick point hatch tool, and I'm assuming I'll get a solid hatch. If I click over here in these closed areas, I'll get a solid hatch. So why am I not getting this in this case? Well, the reason is because this is not a closed polyline. So a quick way to fix that is to come here, delete this node, and by the way, deleting and adding nodes is a toggle. It's the control button. I forgot to mention that earlier. So I'll delete that. And now what I'll do is I'll select this, and I think it's down here. I just can't see it. Yep, close. And so now when I close this and I come in and I do the same type of thing with the pick point hatch, aha, it closes. And that's also important when you're working in 3D. So let me undo that a couple times so it's now not closed, and go to an isometric view. And now if I extrude this, this is where you see this a lot when working in 3D. So I'll right click, go to draft mode, and lo and behold, I've got a extruded object, but it's not solid in the middle or closed in the middle. So, and again, it's the same reason. So again, we'll use the edit tool. I'll delete this node because I don't actually want to create a second node like that when I close it. So we'll get rid of these two with the control button. Okay, and then I'll come here, right click, and go down to the bottom here and say close. And now when I do the same thing in isometric mode, extruding this, aha, I get a nice correctly made 3D element. The final thing I'm going to talk about today are some of the modifier tools. So we'll cover some of the most common ones, and I'll draw a couple of other objects here. Okay, so modifier tools, the most common ones I'm going to cover or talk about are the meet two lines, the fillets, and the trim tool. So meet two lines, we'll find an intersection of two line segments. This probably won't work. Oh, it did. Cut it actually. And so this is a really nice tool for finding intersection points of two angled lines that are you can't accurately figure out what the intersection point is. This will actually work as a trim tool as well in certain situations. So meet two lines, very, very cool modifier tool. And then along with that, let's talk about the trim tool. This will come into play quite a bit for you as you're working with 2D objects. And again, I'll look down in the lower left corner to find the cutting edge. I can do this a couple of ways. Let's just choose this line, and now I can also shift as well and choose some other lines. In this particular case, there's not really anything there that I want to use, but in this case I'll just use a single line as my cutting edge, and then I can go around and select lines that are intersecting. Let's try a different, little bit different use case here. So I'll draw a couple lines here and go to the trim tool, and this time I'll pick this line, and now I can come in and select anything in between those, and it'll delete those segments. The fillet tool in TurboCAD is really nice. I'll draw a rectangle here, choose the fillet tool, and I can set a radius down here in the inspector bar, and I can actually use this tool multiple times. This is a fairly large object, so that's probably not a large enough radius to actually see what's going on. Let's try 10. Okay, and I'll select one edge, select the other edge, and now I get a nice round filleted edge. And the nice thing about our fillet and chamfer tools, by the way, is that you can use them multiple times. So let's say I didn't actually mean to do that. Let's try 7. So let's see if this will fix that. And sure enough, it will put that back. And now if I use the radial dimension tool and just click here, I should get a nice 7R value. Undo that a couple times using the Control Z key, and I'll just quickly show you the Chamfer tool to close things out here today. So the Chamfer tool, similar type of scenario, looking down in the X and Y, or I'm sorry, in the spectral bar, I get distance A and distance B. Let's do 5 and 5. And now if I click on line segments here, I should be able to get a nice clean cut corner using those values. Okay, so that's all the time we have today. I hope that you found this informative and fun, and I encourage you to go through TurboCAD using some of the techniques that you've learned today, and just enjoy what you're doing. Again, if you have questions and you're not already registered on our user forum, I'd highly suggest that you do that. Thanks very much for watching, and please continue to follow us on YouTube. I will be posting this video there as soon as I am done processing it, and thank you very much.